Hello everyone, my name is Mike and welcome back to the YouTube channel. Today we're continuing having a look at historical videos and we're continuing with Sabaton. Based on the feedback from the last Sabaton video, some of you seem to enjoy it and want me to continue, and that's what I plan to do. And today we're having a look at the Winged Hussars. Now I have the lyrics on my phone right in front of me, and the reason why is because I'm looking at an unofficial music video similar to what I've done with Rock's Drift, just because I feel like it might be a bit more entertaining to you watching, and also, such as now the freeze frame of the thumbnail, it allows me to talk and provide a little bit more information visually on what this seems to show. So the music video also seems to be based on the Siege of Vienna, which, having a quick scan of the lyrics, seems to be what the topic of this music video is. So the Winged Hussars, essentially possibly one of the most well-known cavalry units in history. You know, they're iconic. I mean, the wings themselves are iconic, probably up there with the household cavalry of modern day for the British royal family, the British army. Then possibly as well up there with Napoleonic era cavalry such as the Polish lancers themselves, incidentally, and things like the Empress dragoons and stuff. And speaking of how well recognised that they actually are, you know, you just need to have a look at their equipment. You know, looking on here, this film seems to have actually done a really good job of kind of replicating what a Winged Hussars would look like. And of course you have the massive wings, and these wings would have like wooden frames. They'd be attached to the back of the saddle or the back of the back plate, depending on one. And these would be like this arcing kind of wood, or in some of them would be this really ornate kind of forged metal, and then they have eagle feathers attached to it. And there's not clear reason why. Nobody actually knows. Some people suggest that is a ceremonial kind of detail. However, there are numerous accounts of them wearing them into battle, so that doesn't seem to hold weight. What seems to be more likely, based on the evidence that we have, is that it was for intimidation. You know, intimidation of both horses, because horses can get spooked quite easily by things that they're not familiar with, and this would of course be terrifying. And as somebody who has done living history and things like that and reenactments of battles, I can tell you that standing still while several horses charge at you can be quite daunting, let alone that be filled with people who want to do malice to you, and then these on their back. And there's some suggestion that the actual wings themselves, as they charge, you know, as you're going by and the wind is whipping past you kind of thing, that the wings on the Winged Hussars would almost make like a kind of, like the sound of almost like a bird's wing. And so compare that by 1,000 and then add the horse's hoofs in that must have sounded like thunder was charging towards you, which I can only imagine the psychological impact that might have had. Coupled in with that, you have the other equipment that the Winged Hussars would have. They'd have a sabre, a cavalry sabre, which would be relatively commonplace throughout most cavalry units. Very easy to use from the saddle, both engaging both cavalry and infantry. And depending on who they were fighting, they may well carry a second sword with more of a straight edge to try and find in gaps of armor, more comparably seen during, you know, like the medieval era, where you have straight blades rather than curved blades due to the armor that they're fighting. Then they have their lance, of course, and their lance, generally speaking, if it's anything comparable to European knights, would be relatively light wood, probably around 15 to 20 feet, and it'll be made of something like beech or pine or ash, something relatively cheap, relatively numerous, because the lance's role isn't to be durable, it is to meet on the charge and generally break on the charge or be discarded after the charge, because fighting in close order with a 20-foot, 15-foot weapon is not ideal. So they would be relatively cheap. And about probably the only other equipment that they'd really have in terms of weaponry would probably be pistols, which of this era would be wheellock pistols most likely. And they'd maybe carry 1, 2, 3 of these, which they would then fire, and then likelihood fire and forget almost type thing. Fire, and then if they need to, just either holster or drop the pistol, draw another one if they need to use it, because remember, again, pistols during this era are not particularly accurate, let alone when you're on horseback. So, the Winged Hussars. The Winged Hussars, I feel like, if I'm to explain them, are the equivalent almost to a hangovering medieval knight. Because it's very much similar way to how they was raised. So the Polish-Lithuanian Commonwealth, which is where the Winged Hussars come from, was a hierarchical kind of class structure. And similar to medieval knights, is the people who made up the Winged Hussars were of the nobility and landowning classes at the very top. When times of war was happening, the nobility would then call the nobles beneath them, and then the nobles beneath them would then call their retainers of their own households, and then collectively they would come together and they would be the Winged Hussars. And similar to kind of medieval European knights themselves, while the king did provide them some things and did pay them for their service, for the most part the Winged Hussars, similar to medieval knights, had to supply their own equipment, their own armour, their own horses, and see to their own household, essentially. So that's one of the similarities, in that they come from the noble classes, the landowning classes, and they had to provide their own equipment. But additionally as well, similar to knights, is that they were trained in horsemanship and martial arts from a very young age. People in the nobility who would grow up to be Winged Hussars were trained horsemanship from a very young age, and they were drilled rigorously and trained rigorously. And this culminated in some very dangerous training, such as they would joust without a block between them, so the horses could collide directly to themselves if they wished. They would, again, joust themselves, and then just before they was about to make point of impact, lift their lances, and these are real steel they're using, they're not using training lances, so again, real possibility for danger. But it's over time, this drilling, over and over and over again, allowed them to be such the force that they was. And they grew to real prominence before Vienna, probably within the 30 Years' War and through the wars with Russia, with Sweden. But of course, the real thing that they're known for is the Battle of Vienna themselves. And at this stage, there was kind of almost, in terms of contemporary modern at the time, European armies, the Winged Hussars were kind of finding themselves kind of outmatched by superior tactics, by superior firepower, essentially, because gunpowder and such and artillery is becoming a slightly more well known. The tactics to counter the kind of medieval style of heavy cavalry charges is getting better and better. But the Ottoman and the Russian armies, who they'd been fighting and having more success recently speaking, are still kind of not entirely caught up yet. And this culminated in the Siege of Vienna in 1683. So Vienna was part of one of the many Ottoman attempted conquests of Europe. And Vienna was kind of their fixation point. A couple centuries earlier than Vienna themselves, you had Suleiman the Magnificent tried to siege Vienna, and he failed. And this would kind of provide almost an obsession with the Ottomans in trying to take Vienna. The Ottomans themselves, if you're not aware, had their own empire. It wouldn't collapse entirely until the First World War, or until after the First World War rather. But they're also where we have things like Dracula, the inspiration of Dracula, not from the Ottomans, but from Vlad the Impaler, who was from Wallachia, which is modern day kind of around Transylvania area. And so Vlad launched a kind of terror war, guerrilla war against the Ottomans for years. That's where we get the inspiration to Count Dracula and stuff like that, and the reason why it was called Vlad the Impaler is supposedly he was to massacre towns and Ottomans and stuff like that, and then impale them on stakes and then leave them to basically just terrify the Ottomans and break them out entirely. Done that for years, but that's previous conflicts. This again is just, as I said, one of many. Culminating probably the most important Ottoman conquest that for European history is the fall of Constantinople, modern day Istanbul, by the Ottomans. And kind of again, at this stage, generally, what you just need to know is the Ottomans essentially control large swathes of the Balkans, your Greece, your Hungary, that kind of area, and they're striking again at Vienna. And I'll let the video play, and I'll do similar to what I've done with Rorke's Drift, where as the video plays, then I'll come back and we'll fill in the gaps depending on what the lyrics say.
sky. Wounded soldiers left to die. Will they hold the wall, or will the city fall? Dedication, dedication, they're outnumbered 15 to 1. And the battle's begun, and the winged hussars arrive. Coming down the mountainside. Then the winged hussars arrive. Coming down, they turn the tide.
Okay, so just before the second verse comes in, so I just want to go through that first verse. So, a cry for help in time of need, await relief from Holy League. 60 days of siege, outnumbered and weak. Sent a message to the sky, wounded soldiers left to die. Will they hold the wall, or will the city fall? So, from that first verse, again, for those of you who don't know, the Holy League was this kind of band of numerous Christian countries, so including, so it's Austria, Poland, which is where Austria is where Vienna is, for those of you who aren't great at geography. But you have Austria, you have Poland, and then there was numerous other kind of German states, because remember the unification of Germany hasn't actually happened yet. So there was numerous smaller German states who also committed to this Holy League, and it was almost kind of like a continuation of the Crusades in this, to this extent. Was, you know, the Ottomans were seen as this evil, and the Holy League was the savior, and that's how kind of it was portrayed. Similar, again, as I said, to previously Crusades. This was a just war. This was a just cause to fight for, and so the Holy League were marching to the aid of Vienna. And as it said, dedication. They're outnumbered 15 to 1, and general estimates probably put that around right. I believe that the besieging Ottoman Empire army was around 150 odd thousand, and the siege, those sieged at Vienna was maybe around 11,000 estimates put. And then obviously when the Holy League were marching to relieve Vienna, and I think again their estimates put the relief army and garrison combined to around probably 95,000 men at an estimate. And so if you're talking about just the garrison, then yes, near enough is 15 to 1, 16 to 1, kind of around that ballpark. And so yeah, so while the garrison is highly outnumbered, what you need to remember as well is Vienna's defences were formidable. There's a reason why Suleiman failed to take it in the first siege a couple of centuries ago, and it's a reason again why the Ottomans are having real trouble now. The defences are extremely formidable, the walls are incredibly thick, and indeed in some parts of the wall, the artillery, the cannons that were mounted on the wall were stronger than those that was actually besieging it, so counter battery was a thing. However, the Ottomans' siege networks were extreme. So in order to siege it, they immediately set up a network of trenches and stuff like that to protect the besieging army from counter battery and artillery fire from there. However, again, as said, hugely outnumbered, and that's why the relief army is on their way. And eventually the winged hussars turned up. I'm going to hold off though, because I've just seen the second verse and I want to talk about that, and I want to try and do it in a bit more of an organic way.
As the days are passing by, and as the dead are piling high, no escape and no salvation. Trenches to explosive halls are buried deep beneath the walls. Plant the charges there and watch the city fair. Desperation, it's a desperate race against the mind, and a race against time, and the winged hussars arrive. Coming down the mountainside, then the winged hussars arrive. Coming down, they turn the tide.
Okay, so again, we're coming into the second verse there, and that is, you know, as the days are going on, as the song says, as the days are passing by and the dead are piling high, you know, the defense is getting desperate a little bit. The garrison is fighting extremely hard, But essentially, what the Ottomans' idea is to bring down the walls is to undermine. Hence the expression when we get, which is where they mine underneath the walls, and then they would plant explosives, a mine, and then they would light the fuse, get out, the mine would explode, and bring the wall down upon its own weight and create a breach. Now, they done that, however, quite amazingly, and it would almost be a foreshadowing of what we would see in the First World War. You had counterminers in Vienna, and when the mine was laid, the Viennese garrison was actually able to find the mine and extinguish the fuse. Thus, the mine did not go off. And this would be a similar thing that would happen during the First World War, where you'd have trenches, static warfare, and one of the ways that they fought to break this warfare would be to dig tunnels underneath opposing trenches and then light massive charges and then blow the trenches up from beneath. And equally so, you'd have defensive miners who would be listening out for this type of thing and then seek to make their own tunnels to either intercept the mining crew or intercept the explosive charge when it was being placed or when the fuse or detonation was about to happen. So it's almost, although this is happening in 1683, you'd see mirror images of it in 1914, 1916, continuing all the way till 1918. So yeah, that's an interesting little fact for you there. That that was the real plan. How the Ottomans planned to break Vienna's walls was this mine, but the Viennese garrison was able to find it in time. So now we're about to hit the break, I think.
Cannonballs are coming down from the sky. Janissaries, are you ready to die? We will seek our vengeance eye for a night. You'll be stopped upon the steps of our gate. On this field you're only facing our hate. I've got both the salt and seal in your fate.
Okay, so slight overkill on that last guy from all the Winged Hussars firing their pistols. So cannonballs coming down from the sky. Janissaries, are you ready to die? We will seek our vengeance eye for an eye. And the important thing here as well is because the Winged Hussars contingent, the Polish contingent that arrived for the siege of Vienna was led by King Jan III or King John. Don't ask me how to pronounce his second name. I'll put his full name in the description. I just don't want to attempt to pronounce that. However, he had been fighting the Ottomans for a long time, and when it says seek our vengeance eye for an eye, maybe this is just me overthinking it, but it's because he had suffered numerous defeats against the Ottomans, but he had also won some heroic triumphant victories against the Ottomans. And so Vienna would kind of be the culmination of this. And once the Ottomans had broke, he is quoted as kind of using inspiration from Julius Caesar when he said that I came, I saw, I conquered. King Jan is quoted as saying that when he arrived on the steps of Vienna, he said, came, I saw, God conquered. Again, linking back to this kind of this just war, this just conflict that, a bit like harking back to if God is on our side, then who can be against us? That kind of mentality. Now, I'm just going to quickly run through the actual Battle of Vienna itself. So, as the siege was going on, the Holy League army itself arrived. The cavalry got held up because marching through forests and stuff like that was slowing them down. Because for those of you who don't know as well, forests and stuff like that is tremendously difficult for cavalry to travel through, because horses are big things, and as well it can be quite easily for horses to break legs and stuff like that if they step on uneven ground and all types of things. So the army of the actual infantry rather of the Holy League arrived way before the cavalry, and they arrived on the Kannenberg, which was this kind of mountain, and the Ottomans turned to do them, bar the Janissaries. The Janissaries were kind of this elite unit of the Ottoman army. They were kind of elite infantry. Some of them themselves were actually made up of children taken through the Ottoman blood tax type thing that had been used back in the day, where in conquered lands such as Hungary and areas like that, they would take a certain amount of children who then train or raise as Ottomans, and some of these would then go form the kind of core of some Janissary units. However, as this was happening, the Holy League and the Ottoman lines began to fight, and they'd been fighting for quite a while at this time. And then in the afternoon, the cavalry emerge out of the forest, and this drew huge cheers from the infantry. This drew huge cheers from the garrison at Vienna, who were desperately waiting their arrival, and it culminated in the largest cavalry charge in history. As the Ottoman lines were beginning to kind of grow weary and tired, the arrival of the cavalry, there is some accounts to say that it kind of was a massive morale hit to the Ottomans, who were already tired, and then suddenly you see this wealth of cavalry appear out of the forest. And so there are some speculation that some of the Ottomans already began to break just at the sight of this cavalry. And whether that is true or not is uncertain, but what is certainly true is then 18,000 horses. As I previously said, the largest cavalry charge in human history, led by 3,000 winged hussars themselves, then charged, utterly shattered the Ottomans' lines, ran amok throughout their entire camp, and the Ottoman army was broken in complete disarray. And really, the Siege of Vienna, the Battle of Vienna, however you want to call it, is one of the most decisive battles in European history, in my opinion, because after Vienna, the Ottomans no longer really threaten Europe. It's after Vienna, the Ottoman Empire only goes in one direction, and that is decline. It's a very slow decline. As I said, the Ottoman Empire wouldn't really collapse until the end of the First World War. However, there's a good reason why during, the 18th, 19th centuries, the Ottoman Empire is known as the sick man of Europe, because it is just a matter of when it will collapse, not if it will collapse. Yeah, but that's Sabaton, the Winged Hussars. That is the Battle of Vienna. I don't really know what more I can add to this, so if you have watched this far, then I thank you ever so much for watching. I apologise if I ramble, it's just something that I do. I'm trying to cut down the amount of times that I say as well, but evidently I'm still failing. Old habits die hard, I suppose. So, the link to this music video will be in the description. The link to the original Sabaton video on their channel will be linked in the description as well. Again, if there are any other songs or particular songs that you would like me to look at next, then please leave that in the description below. If you have any constructive criticism as well to provide me on the format of how you would like me to have a look at these videos, whether let the video play out or pause it and go through it verse by verse like what I've been doing with the previous two videos, then please let me know. I want to make this channel the best that I can possibly be, and the only way that I can do that is by listening to you guys. So thank you ever so much for watching. Please stay safe, and I hope to see you next time. Thank you. Bye-bye.